It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. Today is Canada Day. And across the river in Windsor and all across the country, Canadians are celebrating it under the strangest cloud in years. Their closest ally and biggest trading partner, the United States, has spent the past year hitting them with tariffs. U.S. President Donald Trump has also floated the idea of making Canada the 51st state, more than once. The friction is intensifying right here in Detroit. A brand new bridge to Windsor, the Gordie Howe, is finished and ready. But it's sitting empty, reportedly blocked by the Trump administration. Now, here's what makes today remarkable. The U.S., Canada, and Mexico share a big free trade deal. It's what lets cars, food, and almost everything else move across their borders cheaply. When they signed it 6 years ago, they set a date to revisit and decide whether to keep it. That date is today, July 1st. So this Canada Day lands on the exact day that deal comes up for review. My next guest says we've actually been here before, and that tariffs have historically made Canada stronger. Craig Baird is one of Canada's best-known history storytellers. He hosts the podcast and radio show Canadian History X. Craig, welcome to the Metro and happy Canada Day.
Oh, thank you for having me, and happy Canada Day as well.
I want to start with the day itself, if we could. From where you sit, and that's in Alberta, is that right?
It is, yeah.
Okay, what does Canada Day feel like this year with all of this hanging over it?
Well, in Alberta, it's actually pretty unique. So last year, Canada Day, there was a lot of people flying Canadian flags because of the talk of 51st state, which was nice to see because a few years earlier, we had the trucker convoy who kind of co-opted the Canadian flag, and a lot of people didn't want to fly that flag for fear that they would look like some of the individuals in the trucker convoy. But in Alberta right now, because of this minority secession movement within the province, a lot of people are responding by really showing their Canadian pride and flying Canadian flags to show that they may be Albertans, but they are Canadian first. And we're also seeing across the country a lot of flags being flown, people buying flags and really showing our nationalist spirit that doesn't always come out too often.
I do want to get into that, this deepening patriotism and what you've been seeing in the country and how the relationship between the U.S. and Canada has affected that. But first, I wonder if we could go back. You are a student of history, after all, and you've said that this whole standoff has a striking echo, and it goes all the way back to the 1890s. Would you take us there? Because it was a U.S. congressman named William McKinley who wrote a big tariff law. What was it meant to do to Canada?
Well, yeah, that tariff law was pretty bad. It was raising tariffs about 38 to 49%. And on the surface, they were saying it was to protect American industries and such, but there was talk about it forcing Canada to collapse economically because we were relying heavily on the United States as a trading partner, and that would force us to then join the United States or become annexed by the United States. And it was enforced for a couple of years, but it had the exact opposite effect. What happened was Canadians kind of started to band together, and rather than looking as a north-south trade corridor, we turned our eyes back to Britain and started trading more with Britain and the rest of the British Empire. So it actually didn't help the United States. It actually made things much worse, while at the same time more solidified Canada's feeling of being a nation much more. I mean, at the time, we'd only become a country in 1867, so we were still relatively young, and something like this was very much needed to really make Canadians band together. But the McKinley tariffs were definitely one of the first times, at least since Canada became a country, that the United States was looking at a way to get the country under its flag, so to speak. But I mean, prior to 1867, obviously there was the War of 1812. Canada was invaded during the American Revolution. So this was just rather than doing it through the military, it was an attempt to do it economically.
So the tariffs were supposed to pull Canada toward the US, and instead, they pushed Canada away and they lit a
Mhm.
fire of national pride. Canada's prime minister at the time, John A. Macdonald, actually won re election by campaigning against those US tariffs, waving the flag. And so
Absolutely, yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
Absolutely, he did. What he did was he implemented the national policy, and that actually really influenced Canada for several decades into the future. And what it was we created our own tariff system, but we had preferential tariffs for the rest of the British Empire. So we were not charging as much tariffs for the rest of for the British Empire, but we were implementing tariffs against the United States. And it was a very much a way for us to push back against those tariffs that were being implemented on us, and it actually worked quite well. Like you mentioned, Sir John A. Macdonald was reelected. Unfortunately, died about 6 months later after he had a stroke in June of 1891. But still, it very much helped him win that last election.
And things didn't end so well in the US. The president back then was Benjamin Harrison, and he lost his job over the tariffs.
Yeah, he did. Actually, I think the Republicans lost both the House and the Senate as well. So it was a huge backfire. McKinley obviously was able to bounce back from it and become president a few years later, but it backfired spectacularly for everybody involved. The people who thought that it would help them economically, it ended up raising prices for them because they weren't getting the goods from Canada, whether it was livestock or wheat or whatever it might have been. And in Canada, it kind of showed us that there we do have a nice relationship with the United States, but that can change very quickly.
Okay, so be honest with me here because you're the historian. It's a great story. The echo is real. But where does the comparison to the 1890s fall apart?
Well, I think it's a different world for one. Back in the 1890s, Canada was trading with the British Empire and the United States and not many other places. We were also still a very young country. Our economy was diversified, but it was heavily reliant on agriculture, livestock, and then manufacturing in Eastern Canada. Whereas now it's very different. Canada trades worldwide. We've been creating new trading agreements with other countries. So it's not the same type of world that existed back then, and it's allowing us to diversify more and also look to other trading partners and not be so reliant on the United States.
And yet, I mean, Canada has no car companies of its own. Its factories are so tied to the US's. So this is also a point of great tension and pain, no?
It is, yeah. Like you said, it's not like we're building cars up here. We build parts of cars here, and then parts of the cars are built in the United States, and some are put together here, and some are put together in the United States. So the economies are intertwined in many different ways, and that's why things like the Gordie Howe Bridge are so important because we have so much traffic going over the border that we need to, keep that moving very efficiently and keep the economies running. But at the same time, in Canada, there was a lot of people looking at the fact that we have such a huge trading relationship with the United States that it's kind of putting all of our eggs in one basket. And we can still trade with the United States, but we really do have to look to elsewhere in the world in order to ensure that we're not reliant on just one trading partner, because that gives that trading partner a huge bit of power over Canada because of that trading relationship.
I want to pull that apart a little bit more. I'm wondering if you think that Canadians feel like they're stronger now, like the economy is better off or will be better off, that they're more woven into other trade partnerships, that politically they can do better without relying as heavily on the US.
I believe that's the case. Since Mark Carney became prime minister last year, a lot of people have seen him forging trading relationships with India and China and other countries. And I think a lot of Canadians are happy to see that and not just hoping that everything will go back to the way that it was with the United States, because there's a possibility that it might never, or if it does, it might take years or even decades for it to rebuild because of how the relationship has been impacted. I know a lot of Canadians who don't go to the United States anymore because they don't want to support the United States. And even in Canada, people will buy things that are manufactured or grown or whatever it is in Canada and leave products that were manufactured in the United States, especially in the grocery store, on the shelves as just a way to stick it to the United States. And there was a very strong buy Canadian movement that still is going on right now.
I want to think about that, about how Canadians are behaving and how they're seeing themselves right now. Because for a long time, a lot of the world thought of Canada as polite and easygoing, a little overshadowed by its big neighbor. Is that self-image changing?
I think it is a bit. Canadians, we tend to always try to not be too outgoing, I guess, because we don't want to be compared to the United States. So we have national pride and things like that, but we keep it very much under the surface. And it only comes up in times of war where we're very much united, or especially like with the World Cup, if Team Canada's doing well, or if Team Canada's playing in a gold medal hockey game, or whatever it might be, then Canadians very much do kind of show that pride. But I think that there is this image of Canada being quiet and polite, but we also influence the world in many ways. We've created a lot of things the world uses, whether it's peacekeepers or insulin or even basketball. And I think it's just Canada likes to operate from behind the scenes and not always be taking center stage.
Hmm. And yet there are consequences for Canadians when they're disproportionately buying Canadian products and not American ones. I mean, are they losing money when they're only buying Canada but gaining national pride?
I don't know if they're losing money because a lot of people are getting the pride of shopping local and
Hmm.
buying from Canadian producers. And there are a lot of great Canadian companies that are producing the same things that our Americans are. So I think for a lot of Canadians, even if it does cost a little bit more, they're looking at it as they're supporting a Canadian company rather than an American company that, you know, we we don't want to be giving money to the United States, I guess, in many ways. And I think that supporting these Canadian companies is something a lot of Canadians want to do, even with a little bit of extra cost.
Craig, so what you're saying right now is that Canadian pride is superseding some folks' concerns about economics. They're willing to spend more money right now on Canadian goods because of how strained the relationship is between America and Canada, because of the rhetoric from President Donald Trump. People are saying, this is worth it to me to spend that money and support Canada in this way.
Absolutely. There's people who have apps on their phone that allows them to identify by scanning a barcode where something was manufactured and how much of it was manufactured in Canada. And a lot of people are using that to make their buying decisions. And even just in things like what their travel plans are. A lot of Canadians are choosing to travel around Canada rather than go to the United States and or go to Europe or Mexico. So Canadians really, this is the best way that we can respond to what we see as a threat from the United States is by attacking economically and supporting Canada and building up our own economy and supporting building trading relationships elsewhere.
You're listening to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. It's Canada Day, and my guest is Canadian historian Craig Baird. He's host of Canadian History X. We're talking about why this Canada Day arrives with the U.S.-Canada relationship at one of its lowest points in living memory, tariffs, talk of annexation, and why, if history is any guide, all that pressure may be doing the opposite of what it's meant to. I want to go back in history one more time before we shift into the present again. I mean, back in the 1890s, when the U.S. squeezed Canada, Canada did not fold, as you have pointed out. It turned to Britain instead, and trade shifted across the Atlantic. And Canada seems to be doing a version of that now. And you have mentioned this too, particularly it's with China, Japan, Ecuador, and Indonesia. What were the consequences when Canada did this in the past?
Well, with the consequences for the United States was that they did suffer economically because we were shifting our trade elsewhere. And I mean, at the time, we also have to remember that Canada was a dominion of the British Empire. So the Britain still very much controlled a lot of what we did on the international stage. And this was a way for us to kind of start to exert that independence it would take decades of negotiations and determining, what that meant for Canadians to really move away from being a dominion of the British Empire and being a country in our own right. But stuff like this, like the McKinley tariffs that essentially attacked Canada, played a part in that. And I think for the United States, it very much hurt them because it showed that you can attack a trading partner, but that trading partner can attack back. Unfortunately, it was a very long time ago, and history doesn't always repeat, but it rhymes. And we're going through the same thing again, where it's believed that Canada is a weak country, but we can stand together and be very strong and fight back in our own ways, even if it's not militarily.
Hmm. History does not always repeat, but it rhymes. Yes. Some of us could spend some time with that statement, or it would do us good to do so. I'm thinking now, let's move back into this moment. There's serious talk this time from President Trump of Canada becoming the 51st state. I got to tell you, Craig, for many of us living here in Detroit and Windsor, those words have been absolutely shocking. Put that in perspective for me. Is that kind of talk new, or is it a very old American idea in new clothes?
Well, I think since the Second World War, Canada and the United States have really kind of developed a very strong friendship and projected that to the rest of the world as, essentially best friends on the international stage. It's why we have the longest undefended border in the world. But, it has been there in the past. The United States has attacked Canada in the past, both through military and through the economy. But for a lot of Canadians, it was a shock because, I mean, I've always grown up as seeing the United States as our closest ally, our most stable ally. And then to suddenly have talk of a 51st state. And at first you laugh it off, but when you keep hearing it, and then seeing the actions of President Trump worldwide, you start to think, well, what is that actually going to mean? And for a lot of Canadians, we've never dealt with any kind of threat to our independence or our sovereignty in living memory, essentially, probably going back to the Second World War when the Battle of the St. Lawrence was occurring in the St. Lawrence River with the Germans. But I think that it was just very shocking for a lot of people. And it took us a little bit to kind of understand that this could actually be a threat. It might be more than bluster. And that's why you start to see this nationalism start to rise and this elbows up mantra of a lot of Canadians to show that we're not the 51st state, we're an independent country and we're going to stay that way.
Okay. I hear what you're saying right now. People in Canada are viewing America poorly, and it is invigorating them from a nationalistic perspective. I'm wondering if you know of folks who think otherwise, who actually like this boisterous attitude coming from the U.S.
Yeah, I'm in Alberta, and there's a lot of people in Alberta who do like that. Again, when I say that Canadians are mad at the United States, it's kind of like with Alberta, where there is a small minority who are pushing the separatism agenda, but the majority of Albertans are proud to be Canadian, and it's the same with across Canada. We know that the majority of the United States and Americans don't want to mess up the relationship with Canada and see Canada as a friend. It's just a smaller minority that's causing this. But in Alberta, there are people who very much think that Alberta should be part of the United States, should be the 51st state. They feel like it would be better for them than being part of Canada, and it's part of that secession movement. And that's why you saw some of the separatist leaders going to the United States and actually meeting with officials from Trump's cabinet or Trump's government to talk about this and secure loans if the separation ever were to happen.
Do you know how they think life would be better?
I think there's a lot of misguided ideas. They talk about that there will be no income tax and we will have tons of oil and gas going out. I think it's pie in the sky visions of things that aren't going to happen. And the thing is that some Albertans complain about Ottawa being far away, but Washington D.C. is even farther away. So I don't see that Alberta would actually benefit at all by being part of the United States. But the people who want that independence or who want to be part of the United States are looking past a lot of the things that would be bad about it and just thinking that it would be golden days ahead for Alberta.
Craig, I want to end on this note. For all the friction over the years, these two countries, the U.S. and Canada, keep ending up side by side. 2 world wars, a shared air defense system, the longest shared border on Earth. When you step back, is this a real break or just another rough patch in a long marriage in the last 30 seconds we have?
I would say it's just a rough patch in a long marriage. We've had a very good relationship for decades. A lot of people don't want to get rid of that. Our economies are intertwined. Even our militaries work together. I think it's just a rough patch. It might take a few years to heal, but it will eventually heal.
Craig Baird hosts Canadian History X, a podcast and radio show about the good, the bad, and the weird of Canada's history. Craig, thanks so much for joining us. And again, happy Canada Day.
Oh, thank you. And happy Canada Day as well.
It's the Metro on WDET. Southeast Michigan is under an extreme heat warning through Thursday, with heat index values expected to reach 105 or more. Be safe and make a plan to be in cool, air-conditioned spaces, stay out of the sun, and drink plenty of fluids. And for parents and caregivers, children are far more susceptible to heat-related illness than adults. Make sure kids are well hydrated before and during activities. And don't leave them in hot, unventilated spaces, cars, for example, as temperatures become fatal in minutes. Many cities in Metro Detroit are providing information about cooling centers on their websites. Stay cool and stay hydrated. Up next, America has been tougher on Canada in the past 2 years, as we've been discussing. As part of that attitude, President Donald Trump slapped tariffs on aluminum, steel, and imported vehicles. How has that affected workers in Windsor? And how has it changed the mood on Canada Day? We'll answer those questions next on the Metro. Stay with us.